It usually starts with a moment so small you almost miss it. You're standing near the door, keys in your hand, shoes half on, and there's a pause that doesn't make sense on the surface. Nothing bad is happening. No fear, no obvious reason to stop, yet something inside you quietly resists. The outside world feels loud before you even step into it, not in sound, but in weight. The idea of conversations, faces, expectations, even movement, feels heavier than it should. You look back at the room behind you, the familiar chair, the soft light, the stillness that seems to recognize you, and for a second, staying feels like relief, not avoidance. You don't announce this feeling to anyone. You don't dramatize it, you just feel it. A subtle loosening in your chest when you put the keys down. A quiet permission you give yourself without saying the words. You tell yourself you'll go out later. Or tomorrow, or when you feel more ready. And the strange part is, the moment you choose to stay, your body responds first, your breathing slows, your shoulders drop, your thoughts stop racing long enough for you to notice how tired you actually are. You sit, maybe you scroll, maybe you do nothing at all, and in that stillness there's comfort, but also something else you don't quite name, a sense that this space understands you in a way the outside rarely does. At home, you don't have to explain your expressions or adjust your tone. You don't have to be on. You don't have to manage the invisible tension that comes from being seen. Yet somewhere beneath that comfort, there's a quiet question forming. One you don't want to rush. One you barely allow yourself to hear. Why does staying feel this good? And why does leaving feel like such a negotiation? You sense that this moment isn't really about tonight or plans or energy. It feels older than that. Deeper, like it's pointing to something about you that you've never fully put into words, and as you sit there, safe and still, you can feel it waiting to be understood. You've probably noticed how often people misunderstand this about you. They assume staying home means you're lonely, unmotivated, or hiding from life. They say it casually, sometimes jokingly, as if the explanation is obvious. You should get out more. You're missing out. You nod, smile, maybe even agree on the surface. But inside, their words don't quite land, because what they describe doesn't match what you feel. When you're home, you're not empty, you're full of thoughts that finally have space to stretch out. Full of emotions that don't have to compete with noise. Full of a version of yourself that doesn't need editing. You're not running from connection. You're choosing a different kind of it. One that doesn't require performance. Out there, even in pleasant moments, there's a constant low-level awareness. You monitor reactions, you adjust pacing, you sense moods before they're spoken. You don't do this deliberately, it just happens. And while others might call that social ease, you feel it as effort. Not painful effort, but steady, draining effort that adds up faster than you expect. At home, that effort dissolves. You don't have to track anyone else's rhythm. Time becomes softer. Hours pass without friction. You notice small things again. The way light moves across the wall, the sound of your own footsteps, the comfort of silence that doesn't demand anything back from you. Still, there's a tension you carry quietly. A part of you wonders if something is wrong. You compare yourself to people who seem energized by crowds, who collect experiences like trophies, who feel alive only when surrounded by movement. You question whether your preference is a flaw disguised as comfort, and yet, no matter how many times you push yourself outward, the same pattern returns. Relief comes not from being seen, but from being settled. Not from stimulation, but from calm. You sense there's a reason this pattern keeps repeating, not a shallow one, something rooted in how you experience the world itself. And the more you try to ignore that question, the more it quietly follows you back home, waiting for you to finally turn toward it. If you look closely, you'll notice this isn't just about staying inside. It shows up in how you think, how you feel, how deeply you process everything around you. You don't just experience moments, you absorb them. A short interaction can echo in your mind for hours. A simple comment can spark a long inner dialogue you never share. You replay tones, pauses, expressions, not because you're insecure, but because your mind naturally goes there. When you're out, your attention is always slightly split. Part of you is present, engaged, listening. Another part is quietly collecting data, sensing undercurrents, noticing shifts. By the time you return home, that second part is exhausted, and only then do you realize how much you were holding. At home, that background noise finally fades. Your thoughts return to their natural depth. You reflect, imagine, connect dots that don't have room to connect elsewhere. This is where your inner world feels most alive, not rushed, not interrupted, just allowed to exist at its own pace. You may have noticed that you don't crave constant excitement. You crave meaning. You don't want 10 shallow moments. You want one real one, and home gives you the space to process life in that way. To sit with questions without forcing answers, to feel emotions without rushing to label them. But this depth comes with a cost. When the world moves fast, it can feel overwhelming, not because you can't keep up, but because you feel everything more fully. Noise doesn't just sound loud, it feels intrusive. Expectations don't just feel external, they feel invasive. You've learned slowly that home isn't just a place, it's a boundary, a way to regulate how much of the world you let in at once. And yet, you still hesitate to claim that truth fully. You worry it will be misunderstood, reduced, dismissed, so you keep explaining it away as tiredness or mood or convenience. But deep down, you know it's something more intentional than that. Something that has been shaping your choices long before you noticed it, and the closer you get to naming it, the more you realize you're circling a truth you've lived with for years without ever quite facing it directly. Think about how different you feel when you imagine leaving versus staying. Leaving requires preparation beyond logistics. You prepare emotionally, you rehearse, you anticipate. Even good plans come with a subtle mental checklist. Who will be there, how long it will last, how much of yourself you'll need to bring. Staying doesn't require that. Staying feels like permission to be unfinished, to not resolve every thought, to let emotions exist without direction. At home, you're not trying to arrive anywhere. You already are where you need to be. This is why interruptions can feel sharper for you. Why last? Minute changes drain you faster than you expect. Your inner world is carefully tuned, not fragile, but sensitive. Like an instrument that produces depth only when treated with care. You may have noticed that when life becomes too crowded, your desire to stay home intensifies, not as rebellion, but as restoration. You don't withdraw because you dislike people. You withdraw because you need space to return to yourself, and yet a quiet doubt persists. You wonder if staying home too much means you're shrinking your world. You worry about becoming invisible, even to yourself. You wonder where comfort ends and something else begins. This question lingers because you haven't yet connected the full picture. You sense that your love for staying home isn't about fear or laziness. It's about alignment, about choosing environments that match how you're built inside, but the opening moment still hasn't fully revealed itself. That pause at the door, that relief when you stayed, it wasn't random. It wasn't indulgent, it was a signal, and the closer you get to understanding it, the more you realize that moment holds the key to something deeply personal about how you protect your energy, your depth, and your sense of self. You're not quite ready to say it yet, but you can feel the shape of it forming, and it's leading you back to that first quiet decision, waiting patiently for you to finally see it clearly. When you return to that moment at the door now, it looks different. You notice details you overlooked before, the way your body responded before your thoughts did, the calm that arrived without explanation. That wasn't coincidence, it was recognition. You weren't choosing comfort over growth. You were choosing regulation over overload. Somewhere along the way, you learned that too much input blurs your clarity, that constant exposure dulls your sensitivity, and staying home became your way of preserving what feels most real to you. You realize now that your love for staying home is tied to how deeply you experience things. Your mind doesn't skim the surface of life, it dives, and diving requires recovery time. Silence isn't emptiness for you. It's fuel. That opening pause was your system asking for balance, not isolation, not retreat, balance, a return to an environment where your thoughts could settle and your emotions could breathe. This is why home feels grounding rather than confining. It's not about walls or rooms. It's about control over stimulation, about choosing when and how you engage instead of being constantly pulled outward. And suddenly, the guilt softens. You see that staying home isn't what keeps you whole. It's what helps you come back to yourself after being stretched thin by a world that rarely slows down. You didn't fail to adapt. You adapted differently. And that realization begins to change the story you've been telling yourself for years. As everything connects, you start to see patterns with new clarity. How your best ideas come when you're alone. How your emotional insights deepen in quiet moments. How you show up more genuinely when you've had time to reset. Home isn't where you hide from life. It's where you integrate it, where experiences settle into meaning instead of staying scattered. You notice how often you've judged yourself using standards that were never designed for you. Standards that praise constant outward motion, constant visibility, constant engagement, and you see now how unfair that comparison has been. Your rhythm is different, not slower, deeper. You move inward before you move outward. You process before you respond. You restore before you connect again. That pause at the door becomes a symbol, not of avoidance, but of self-awareness, a quiet intelligence that knows when enough is enough. And for the first time, you allow yourself to respect that instinct instead of questioning it. There's a gentle peace that comes with this understanding, not excitement, not relief that demands celebration. Just a quiet settling. You no longer need to justify why staying home feels right to you. You understand now that your preference is not a limitation. It's a reflection of how richly you experience your inner world, how carefully you listen to yourself, how deeply you value presence over noise. The world will always pull outward. There will always be invitations, expectations, movement. But you know where you return to when you need clarity. You know where your mind softens and your heart steadies. And the next time you pause at the door, keys in hand, you won't rush to label the feeling. You'll recognize it, a quiet conversation with yourself. One that doesn't need words. You'll step back into that familiar stillness, not as someone avoiding life, but as someone who understands how to meet it on their own terms. And in that silence, there will be no need to explain. Only the calm certainty that you are exactly where you need to be.